Chris here with the GMKTec Nucbox K8. So this is a mini PC that they sent out to me in exchange for this video. I'm not being paid for it. And what we have here is the new 8000 series from AMD, which is very disappointing if you ask me, because it's simply a rebadge, basically a rename, but they have added an NPU now to this APU. That is really the only difference. It's exactly like the 7840HS, same clock speed, same core count, and same, but very good, Radeon 780M, and that is our integrated graphics. So in this video, I'm going to test it out. I'll let you know all the pros and cons, exactly what to expect with this new K8 model. So this is what is included with the Nucbox K8. We've got our power cable, HDMI cable, a VESA mounting bracket with screws there for it, so you can mount that on the back of a TV or on a monitor, which is good. We have a warranty card and a power supply. This is a known brand, Hunt Key. I see a lot of these. They are normally like a laptop brand of power supply. And we've basically got laptop components here anyway with this model. So 120 watts is its maximum output, which is good. It's definitely sufficient for the chipset that we do have here. Then some paperwork, which is this right here, a user guide, user manual for our K8. And it just goes over some very basic standard stuff, talks about our ports that we do have there, and little technical specs too about the various different models. So the frame around the outside of it, it may look like it's metal, but this is plastic. And to me, it kind of feels a little bit cheap. You can see some seams here. It really could look a little bit better, more premium if it was metal, and that would dissipate the heat a little better. So we've got ventilation either side of it, and there are 2 fans in this apparently. Now I won't be tearing it down to take a look at that because I want to keep the factory paste job intact. That's the reason why I do not do the full tear downs with these. It's not because these companies request I don't. It's just because I believe that's the best way to handle things. So it's just like one of the units you bought yourself here. So along the bottom, we've got the little hooks there. That's for the VESA mounting bracket, 4 rubber feet there, obviously. And to gain access to the internals, I'll show you that shortly, but it's just removing the top. You can see I've partly removed it already. That is just for the video. That's why it looks like it's coming off, but it's normally clipped in like this. So 2 2.5 gigabit LAN ports here. HDMI, this is 2.0, unfortunately. It's not HDMI 2.1. Why? I don't know. DisplayPort 1.4. And USB 3 here. This is Gen 1, USB 3.2 Gen 1. USB 2.0, our power in, obviously. And this is where the hot air comes out. Kensington lock slot right there. And then we do have 2 USB 3.2s. These are the 10 gigabit ports here, both of those. And then this is our USB 4. So good to have this one. It's full spec, so that's the 40 gigabits per second that it can handle data, and it does support up to 100 watts of power delivery, and then a 3.5 with mic support. This is our power button, which is plastic there. Green, yeah, the color of it, they could have made that something a little bit different there. And this is a status, well, there's a status LED behind it so you know when it is on. So, internals. Here you just need to lift off the top. Okay, and you'll see we've got this little tiny cooler fan here at the top. So that's going to keep the SSD, the RAM cool, because previous mini PCs that I've reviewed, especially the AMD Ryzen ones I did notice, did have some problems with the RAM just getting way too hot, causing corruption and instability, and the system's freezing up or just rebooting on us. So hopefully that won't happen. I'll let you know in this video if it does, of course. So 4 screws here on the outside. I do need to remove those first, and then I can lift off this top portion and show you the upgrades possible. There are some little tabs either side that keep this in, so make sure you use a pry tool just on the side, and then you can clip it up. So it's a little difficult to get out. It's not the easiest thing. Now when you pull it up, don't just yank it up straight away, because there is this. You'll see we've got a little plug there for that fan, which is our RAM cooler, SSD cooler, as I just mentioned before. So that you need to just wiggle and then remove. And you'll see that we do have our PCIe 4.0 slots. There's 2 of them here, so that's great to see. There's no room for a 2.5, should I say, drive in this at all, and you can kind of see why, because there just wouldn't really be room. It looks like maybe on the back here there could have, But with this height of the unit, no, just not possible there. So great to see they've used Crucial brand there for our RAM. And this is a DDR5, and it is the 5600 mega transfers they're using with this one here. And SSD brand, well, I'll let you know that later on, but I can kind of see an M there. I don't really know. So it's not looking like a normal kind of brand that I deal with. Good to see they have put a cooler on it, at least there. And the Wi-Fi card, well, that's located underneath this SSD. Wi-Fi antenna location is at the front of this Mini PC. So for the best possible signal strength, I recommend you have the front of the Mini PC aimed towards your Wi-Fi router. So first up, our BIOS, and the good news is we do have advanced setting tab. Now, not everything is there, but GMKTec has given us the important settings, and this is really good to see. So if you're going to run this on a switch as a server or something, maybe a file server, whatever, you can have it auto power on. Good setting to have, that option there. Now we do also have the wake on LAN, USB on boot, blah, blah, blah. That's all kind of normal, but these are interesting settings here. So by default, out of the box, it is balanced, okay? Our power limit here. Now you can put it onto performance, which is 65 watts. And I know a lot of people in the comments are probably going to say, hey, why did you not review it with its maximum performance to see what it can really do? The new chipset, the new Ryzen, the 8845HS. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to put it onto performance. I know I don't normally do this, and no, I'm not doing this because the company asked me either. Just believe me, I just think a lot of people are going to ask for that. And you can even set here our default for our RAM, for shared RAM here for the 780M. So you can up this right up to 16 gigabytes. But in my experience, that causes instability, so I won't put it that high, but I'll give us a very healthy 8. We'll see what happens. 8 should be, I think, stable. So we'll see what happens with that. Now you've got CPU configuration, a few more things in there. And none of those we need to touch under normal circumstances. And then memory configuration, well, there's a few things you can change in here, but I'm going to leave that on auto, okay? Because it should be at the maximum 5600 anyway. So those are what I'm going to go with, run with there with the settings. So here we go with just a couple of benchmarks here. I'm not going to go mad with these. In fact, I'm going to show you barely anything with benchmarks because, as you'll see, it turns out to be really pointless because we're looking at the same performance as the last gen chip. So the 7840HS, identical kind of scores here. What I'm getting with Geekbench 6, you can see the single core score is good. It's almost 2500. We're looking at almost 13,000 multi-core score. And sometimes those older chipsets can get the 13,000. Now I expected maybe a little bit higher here because of the higher wattage. The power limit I have set being in the power mode of 65 watts didn't seem to make really any difference. I did test this later with the balanced and I've put it back into performance and it was more or less about the same, plus or minus like 50 points or whatever. That was it. So very, very little in terms of difference there. So why is it so disappointing? Well, this is because this is a basic rebrand. This is all AMD has done, and I was so disappointed when I found out about this. I just thought, what the hell are AMD doing? They've missed an opportunity here, and they've taken a very, I feel, a lazy way of doing things. They've just rebranded it. They've added the AI. This is the only thing that's new, really, is this. Okay, so we've got now the NPU. So we've got NPU performance there. That's the new part of the chipset, the APU that they've added. That is it, because look at those clock rates. So we're looking at a base clock of 3.8 gigahertz, boost clock 3.1. It's got the 8 cores, 16 threads, and then you look at the old chip, it is identical. Identical. And this is why the performance is, for me, identical. It still is the Radeon 780M graphics. You can see the same clocks there, the same graphics core count of 12. That's the old version, okay? But you see here, the 12, exactly the same, and the same 2700 maximum for our GPU, for the integrated graphics for its top end frequency. So nothing new, just the AI, that's it, and just a very lazy rebrand. Now I was hoping that AMD would add another few cores here, everyone was, and perhaps release it as the 880M or something else, but no, that didn't happen. So that's why I'm not going to go crazy with benchmarks, because it is identical. So if you can find a 7840HS mini PC for cheaper, I'd say go for it. go for it. Unless maybe you want to use and you do need the AI. Very limited case for that. Maybe someone is out there using diffusion or they're using something they need for AI. Okay, then you've got a legitimate excuse for it. Otherwise, I just wouldn't really go for that. It's not worth it at all. Very disappointing from AMD. And here you can see that the SSD, so PCIe 4.0, very good speeds. I expected it to be actually slower than this. And it's a Mason Semi SSD. That's all it lists in the device manager, device ID, hardware ID. And it's okay. It's good. It checks out. It's not a known brand for me. I've never seen this brand before, but I do like the speeds I'm seeing out of it. So that performance there is very good. And a quick test here of the graphics with a benchmark that is 3D Mark. So this is Time Spy. And you'll see there it's getting 2000, just over 2600 with a graphics score, which is again, like that's last generation kind of scores here. So it unfortunately is no better there. So everything basically the same as it was. So this is why it's kind of, yeah, a little bit boring really because of this. And of course it is our integrated graphics that handles the decoding of HEVC, MP9 and all of that, VP9, sorry, and you'll see that I'll just play a sample clip here that's very smooth. In fact, I think this runs better than Intel's counterpart, although bear in mind I've not tested out the new ARC integrated graphics from Intel, but normally there's a few stutters, but with AMD, seems to be a bit smoother, although there were a couple of drop frames just then. I don't know why that was. I've got nothing going on in the background, Windows updates and all that is turned off too, by the way. And this one here, which is an HDR clip, this is also 4K, and you'll see that it does run fine with no problems at all. Okay, it's meant to look slow at the start there. Sorry, just mute that. There we go. So that's running fine, and even when I go and just maximize this, so looking very good. No drop frames. So it's great, a great chipset, great APU for media playback. Things like this, it's really good. The Last of Us, this is part 1, and a game that has been requested a lot. So I'm running this with the default low preset for graphics. Oh, it's gone to auto here, but it's in fact low. It selects low anyway. So everything is on low. You wouldn't want to run any higher than that, not with integrated graphics, of course. And then resolution, 720p. Let's have a look and see how it runs. Okay, so far, this is looking very good for integrated graphics. Yes, it looks grainy. Yes, it's a bit washed out. And yeah, we've got some downscaling and whatnot and FSR and all that. It's on by default, I think, with the low preset. But what is important is the frame rate. Is it going to be playable or not? And it is looking good. Around 60 frames per second, you can see here. And this is just as far as I got. Unfortunately, I lost my save game. Well, I've played this with the PlayStation version. The original, and this is the remake, of course, now on PC here. So it's looking promising, considering look at all the vegetation, look at what it has to render still, and we're getting this kind of frame rate. So in fights and whatnot, yeah, it's going to drop down a little bit. Some areas of the map that are very, very heavy, but looking really good. Very good, I think, for this kind of a modern game with still very good looking graphics for a low setting preset, that is. So you can see we're at the maximum 2 clock there. So the 2700 megahertz there for the Radeon 780M and 60 watts. It doesn't really seem to go over the 60 watts, even though I've got it set to 65, but that's all fine. Let's move on to a few other games. Witcher, which is in my test spot here that I like to test out because it's very demanding. Now this is at 1080p. And a little choppy. You can see the frame rate stabilizes around the sort of mid 40s here, but I just find that a little bit too choppy. So I'll test it now at 720p. And by the way, this is the lowest setting preset again. So this is more like it, a lot better. You can see around 80 frames per second, so much smoother, a lot faster, not getting those horrible stutters before, although it does dip down to about, what was that, 56 frames per second. Still looking very good, and I do find this performance similar to what I've seen out of the best mini PCs with the last gen, the Ryzen 7000 series. So really, like I've just been talking about before in this video, it is basically the same. What is helping out here is the power limit being set to 60 watts. And finally, Cyberpunk 2077. So this is the low preset. FSR is on by default, so I've left it on here. And 720p, you can see it's playable. Looking good. But really, this is the same as the last gen. It really is no different here. It's just again that power limit that I've upped that is helping a little bit. And note that the turbo here isn't always at the 2700. Okay, it is dropping down. You'll see that some certain areas it drops down to say 2200 instead of holding that 2700. It just really depends on the area of the map that you're going to see that happening. But overall, very good for integrated graphics to be able to play demanding games like this, Cyberpunk 2077, at this kind of frame rate at 720p. And still looking, I think, pretty good. We'll see what happens with tactical here. Still good frame rate, still very, very playable. Just before I get onto the thermals, there's one thing I wanted to talk about, and that is the USB 4 port, which does support Thunderbolt 3 for devices. What I've noticed is it will occasionally disconnect on me and reconnect, and I see this on a lot of AMDs for some reason. I noticed that with Intel it tends to be a little bit more stable, perhaps down to the chipset, could be down to drivers. So my drive here, my external Type-C drive that I'm using, this is a Thunderbolt 3 drive, working fine, good transfer speeds over it. It's just occasionally that's very annoying that it would disconnect, reconnect, and if you do run games off an external drive, well, that's going to cause some big issues. It's just one thing I wanted to point out, just a minor little niggle that I have with it. I do find that to be a little bit annoying. So that Type-C port does support power delivery. I've tested it, it works fine. The PC hasn't cut out with a 100-watt power delivery power supply that I've been using. It's been fine. It didn't cut out at all, so that's a good sign. And what about 4K 120 Hertz? Yes, working with, again, that USB 4 port, so that's good. And the thermals, being monitoring them, they are good. Fan noise, well, you see it got up to 90 degrees basically here. That's the hottest it's gotten so far. That's a bit of gaming, stress tests, benchmarks, all of that. The fan noise is constant, sadly. It doesn't completely drop off 100%. So the fan curve they have set is just normally always on. Maybe at the start when you turn on the Mini PC, you'll notice it to be very quiet. But as soon as it just gets a little bit of warmth in there, it doesn't tend to go away, I've noticed. So the fan is always on. And when you start to stress it out, you do hear that fan. It's not super offensive, but I'll give you a sample of it now. I do find it slightly annoying. I wish it was a little bit quieter, but the thermals are good. It's not thermal throttling. I just wish that it could be controlled a little bit better, or we could manually adjust that too through the BIOS. Would be good to tweak it. But here's that sample. Worst case scenario here with a stress test gaming. So there we go. The K8 is a very good mini PC. Good fan noise, good SSD speeds, great options that it have. Wi-Fi 6E, did test it out, works great. It could have better fan noise. The USB 4.0 port sometimes disconnects and reconnects, which is a little annoying, but it has been stable, it hasn't powered off, and even over power delivery Type-C, no issues with it either. But I would probably go for one of the previous Gen 7000 series because AMD's just simply rebadged this chip really and added the MPU. It is truly disappointing. At least Intel has new integrated graphics. They're doing something slightly different. They've got the ARC integrated graphics now putting pressure on AMD. Great to see this competition head to head. It's great for the end consumer. But this year is going to be very bad for consumers, especially if you're looking at AMD mini PCs, because now we're going to have 30, 50 of these products, probably mini PCs and gaming handheld consoles, all with basically the same chip, but rebadged as the 8000 series. And that's not something I really want to cover. I don't want to be going over those again and again. And every single mini PC is the best yet, the most amazing yet. And it just becomes an absolute bore and it's tiring. And that brings me on to another note that mini PC reviews from me will probably be a little bit scarce in 2024. I'm going to move away from them a little bit unless something's really interesting for me, because what's happening as well, and not GMKTec either, by the way, but a few of the companies out there that are the big mini PC producers, they intentionally are delaying review units for me. So they have other types of channels that cover them first, types of channels that you may know of. They're very popular and I don't have anything against them, but they're a very different style of review that's 100% positive, never mention anything bad and everything's amazing kind of reviews, which aren't reviews if you ask me anyway. And I think those companies don't like my style because I might say, hey, the fan noise is bad, hey, the Type-C port has issues, and they don't really want that to be mentioned. They don't want that to be shown. They don't want fan noise samples, which I do. That's my style. So just to warn you, I will probably have less Mini PC reviews, and it's looking like it's going to be a boring year unless those Intel Mini PCs with the new ARC graphics are simply outstanding and a lot better than what AMD's offering with their rebadged 8000 series. So thank you so much for watching this review, and I hope to see you back in the channel. Bye for now.